Alright guys, we're back again, and this is a long and overdue video where we're going to be working on an all-wheel drive CRX. This was a CRX that I purchased almost a year ago, if not exactly a year ago, and I bought it because we were going to do a swap in it. We had just completed the Budget EF CRX that was using a K series engines, and it was based on like how cheap can we do this. Well, that video is actually still in the editing process. It's been almost 2 years now. It's shuffled a bunch of hands. The footage got tossed in between and lost and stuff, and there's still issues with that, getting that up, but we developed many products based on that car for this particular swap. And so I got the CRX, and I happened to have a base model RSX motor that was 5-speed, and we were just going to drop that in. So if you were following my how to yard videos, I showed you how to get that. Matter of fact, that video is called How to Yard Like a Girl, who was featuring a friend of mine who is now my wife. That's the engine that we were going to use to drop into this car, and we were going to call that video Fastest Swap. Fastest Swap was not meant that the vehicle was going to be fast, but it was going to be the fastest K-Series swap, because of all the parts that we have available are ready now and bolt on and good to go. So basically that's what we were going to do with the car, and then one of my buddies needed some help. He came to me around Christmas time, and that's really slow in the automotive industry, and I just didn't have any money to help him out with. So then I decided to put the car up for sale, and we were going to do the swap in it, and it ended up selling to a guy out in New York, and we were going to do the RSX base model swap in the vehicle. Things changed because we found a CRV transmission here, all-wheel drive, and it was all the rage then, and it still is now. And then once we did that, then bam, we ended up with the Type S motor. So this guy ended up just picking up these two and discarding the base model motor altogether. But the swap is pretty much going to be the same thing, the same idea, the same concept. So being that this is not a pullout, this could be more of a how to yard type of video, because a lot of you guys, that if you're pulling motors out of the yards or the salvage yards or getting them secondhand, you're going to be missing a lot of things like the flywheel or the clutch. But you know, I stockpile that stuff. So in a lot of my other videos, you know, if it's a K-Series manual car, I'll basically always pull the flywheels. I have a couple of flywheels, kind of, as you see here, that the alternators are missing off of this. So I'll show you how to piece that together also. So in preparation of that video, I actually already prepared the car. Looking under the hood, it's pretty basic. Now, the guy from New York was super excited about getting a CRX because he was explaining to me that EFs are just not plentiful out there, and if they are, they're all rusted. There is no major dents in this thing. It's not perfect, but now I promise you the interior is much cleaner than what you see right now, but we've been acquiring and stacking up parts for the whole year, and I think we're pretty much ready. We have essentially everything that we want to use. And we're getting a wide, three-piece wide front end, because I believe he's going to make a drag car out of this thing too. We paid $700 for the car, which is about going rate for EFs out here in the West Coast, because they are plentiful. Obviously in the East Coast that's different, and you know, they're probably having to pay a little bit more. And if they wanted something from the East or from the West Coast, then they're going to have to pay for shipping anyways. It is what it is. We have our own parts that we're going to be adding to this as well, and I'm excited for you guys to see that. We're going to try to make it turnkey. Like, this is what you do every time you do one of these swaps. We're not going to be using AC. Again, I don't think the car is going to be a street car, and that means stuff like the AC components here and the condensers and stuff can be removed. All right, we need a shifter and cables. We're going to need a K20 style intermediate shaft. We need a K-Series starter. We need a K-Series flywheel. And we're going to need some intermediate shaft bolts, and we're going to need some flywheel bolts. These are going to be the ones that are marked F12. Make sure to find those ones specifically. We made it a good clutch and flywheel off of one of our yard vehicles. I'll post down below links to our how to yard videos, the things that you need to get off of the CRV if you're pulling a transmission on your own. With the exhaust manifold off, we're now putting on the intermediate shaft. This right here, we're going to be using a K20 style intermediate shaft. Now, I believe Hossport makes one for the Accords, which is going to be a little bit longer. It still bolts in to where the intermediate shafts would go, except that it's 2 inches or so longer. From my understanding, Hossport does make swap axles for that particular, for the Accord style intermediate shaft. Those things might be easier to come by than the K20 styles. If you were getting this transmission off of a CRV, you could always grab that intermediate shaft also, because it is the K20 style intermediate shaft. The reason I would prefer to use the K20 is because it helps keeps the axles equal on both sides, or at least pretty close, and that's what you'd want to help eliminate torque steer, especially if you don't have a limited slip differential. The engine and transmission is essentially assembled now and ready for our install. So we'll kind of go over it a little bit, what's going on here. So we have a K20A2 baseline 200 horse. Then it's mated to a 2004 Honda CRV all-wheel drive transmission. Essentially, the bell housing mates with our current K-series engines that we use, your K24, your K20. The back half is basically a K20 transmission. So it bolts on just like an RSX transmission would in any of the cars, except the back half here is very much like an Accord or a TSX, except that at least on the CRVs, 2002 to 2004, they have a speed sensor that bolts right here. If you happen to be one of the guys that ends up getting a K-series all-wheel drive out of an Element, chances are that transmission is going to have a countershaft speed sensor. That means the speed sensor sits on front of the transmission and not here in the back. Now, that may not be a big deal for EG, EK guys, but it could be for an EF. If you had an EF and you didn't want to run a digital speed sensor, this style transmission you could just take the speed sensor out of and then put your D series or even the B series cable style speed sensor right in there. That means the gauge cluster that's in the vehicle will work. It's cable driven. There's a cable that comes right through the back of the gauge cluster right into the transmission directly. Here's the cable that drives the speedometer, and if we wanted to, we could just stick this right in there. Well, as you can see, there is a ton of parts here. In Budget EF, we go over this mount kit. It's essentially the same. Before the internet, us guys basically had to just figure it out. We set it in there, see what needs to move or what doesn't work, and we pull the engine back out. This bracket here, it has to be removed and it's going to be replaced with a new one. This mount right here, we won't be using either. We're going to take that off, but I'll put a link in for our Budget EF. We show you how to move the brake valve. You know, you can swing it up over here, and that's what we're going to do on this, except we have a brand new line kit that we're going to put out. You know, in 2018, we got into making custom brake lines, tuck stuff. It was really cool, but you know, something had scared me, you know, and I started seeing pictures of stuff coming back, and you know, they didn't look like installers were taking their time, and it was just making me really nervous. Brakes are very important, and you want to make sure that they're done right, they're clear of moving items, and you're not going to have any issues. Generally, when you find out if your brakes don't work is when you need to use your brakes. Most of the time, we're not on the brake pedal until we need it, right? So I took a step back from that quite a bit and re-engineered some things, and the kit that I'm going to be putting on this car, I'm pretty sure is going to be a production item that's going to make doing this job a little bit easier. But there are ways you can do it without using a kit from us, but it's nice and it cleans up the bay. Also, I'm going to still reference you back to a Budget EF what to do about the wiring harness. Again, that's going to be linked down below. All the K-series swaps out there started with this engine right here. This is the RSX Type S. This is what made it all happen, and everything was based off of this post mount here. When you go to grab your motor mount kit, you'll see this mount right here, and it's going to go in direct replacement of the steel part. Just slides down in there and bolts right on. If you were putting in a non-RSX style, you would find out that it doesn't bolt right on. If you're putting a TSX motor in there, an Element or an Accord, you'll see that there's issues. Even if you had the RSX bracket, you go to put it on that block, you'll notice that one of the bolt holes don't align. Now, you could go out and try to source a K24 from a CRV, but is that the engine you want? So then you could try to take off the post mount off of that engine. Well, how difficult is that going to be? Is it available from Honda? Possibly, but there is a part from Hossport that's available. It's called the UKBB. That's called the Universal K-Series bracket. That means it's going to fit with your K24 and your K20. Again, anything that you hear me talk about, I'll make sure to link down below. Along with the all-wheel drive update is also an update on the transmission bracket. Here, the bracket's going to bolt onto pre-existing holes. New for the all-wheel drive is a bolt hole right through the center of it. That center bolt hole is going to attach to one next to the transmission right here. What you'll see right here is the K20. And if you look closely at the bolt hole, we're going to compare this size with that size. And what you're seeing down here is that. Alright, so this right here is 8mm 125, and this size right here is 12 125. Next to the K20 we have a K24. This right here is the larger 12 125. Which, you know, in a race scenario, I would like to use the larger bolt. The K20 is smaller than the K24. There is some material we can work with. There we go, not so bad. I have the bolts in there, but I keep them relatively loose. It will help me align everything, and then we tighten up stuff afterwards. Those two mounts there are pretty much going to finish off what we're going to put on the engine, and then the rest of the stuff we're going to do is prep the car to accept the block. The way we're going to drop it in from the top, this motor mount bracket has to be on, and that's how this is going to hang. Then as we bring it in, we'll be able to drop the transmission bracket that sits here. It bolts down in place. This is pretty much your RSX style bracket, but the way that you see, if we were to drop the engine from the top, this thing here, we're just going to be in the way, and then we have a mount that needs to flip in and out of here, so we'll wait to put that on last. This right here is for the factory airbox. That may just hang up on some things inside the bay, so we're going to get that off as well.